He shoved my graduation cake off the table. Frosting and blue lettering smeared across the patio tiles. Then my 10-year-old nephew. Leo grinned and said, "Eat it off the ground." "Aunt Maya!" The whole table laughed. My mother laughed the loudest. I stood there, a paper plate still in my hand, wondering how a family could sound so cruel. I didn't say a word. I just walked out while their laughter followed me into the dark. That night, my mom's text lit up my phone. "We've chosen to sever all contact. Stay away forever." My sister Jessica liked it. I typed one line back, and that's when everything changed. The backyard looked like something from a magazine. Twinkling string lights, the scent of grilled meat and fresh-cut grass, the sound of easy laughter floating through the warm California evening. From the outside, it was the perfect family celebration for my college graduation, but standing there with a flimsy paper plate in my hand, I could feel it, the invisible cracks, the subtle tension that had always hummed beneath the surface of our family. My mother, Clara, moved through the crowd with her hostess smile, polished and perfect. My sister, Jessica, held court at the center of a group of aunts, glowing in a new designer sundress. Her son, my 10-year-old nephew Leo, shadowed her, already mastering the art of basking in reflected attention. "Tell us about the new promotion," someone called out to Jessica. She laughed, a light tinkling sound. "Oh, it's nothing, really. Just a senior director position. The corner office is lovely, though," Mom beamed, placing a hand on Jessica's arm. "We're so proud. She's worked so hard." I offered a small, tight smile. "The kind you practice when you know you're supposed to participate in a joy that doesn't include you." No one asked about my graphic design degree. No one mentioned the summa cum laude honors. On a small separate table, pushed near the kitchen door as an afterthought, sat my cake. A simple sheet cake with white frosting and elegant blue script that read, "Congratulations, Maya." Every time someone passed by to get more potato salad, they jostled the table, making the cake wobble precariously. I stared at it, this symbol of my achievement, looking so alone and out of place. It was familiar, this feeling, being present but unseen. Celebrated in theory but ignored in practice. A warm breeze rustled the oak leaves overhead. The fairy lights twinkled. For a single foolish moment, I let myself hope. Maybe today would be different. Maybe they'd see me. Then Leo broke from the crowd and darted toward the cake table. His eyes lit with a mischievous glint I knew all too well. He'd learned from the best. "Aunt Maya," his voice cut through the pleasant chatter. "Mom says you only went to college so you didn't have to get a real job." The laughter that followed was sharp, unkind. Jessica pretended to hide her smile behind her wine glass. My mother didn't correct him. She just shook her head with a faint, amused sigh. I thought of every science fair project I'd done alone, every parent-teacher conference they'd missed for Jessica's dance recitals, every time I'd been told to be the bigger person and let my sister have her way. The words, "You're the strong one, Maya," echoed in my head, a mantra used to justify a lifetime of neglect. My throat tightened, but I swallowed the hurt down. I was an expert at that. When Leo's small hands shot out and shoved the entire cake off the table, time seemed to slow. The porcelain plate shattered on the flagstones. A wave of white frosting and blue ink splattered across the ground, speckling my shoes and the hem of my dress. A collective gasp was quickly swallowed by another wave of laughter, louder this time. I stood frozen, my fingers clenched around the paper plate I'd been holding. It bent under the pressure. No one told him to stop. No one scolded him. Not even my father, who I saw watching silently from his lawn chair before he quickly looked back at his phone. The last sound I registered was my mother's voice, light and dismissive. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Maya. It's just a cake. Don't be so dramatic." Something inside me, a thread that had been fraying for 23 years, finally snapped. I set the crumpled paper plate down on the railing. I didn't look at anyone. I didn't say a word. I simply turned and walked toward the side gate, my steps measured and steady on the wooden deck. Their laughter followed me, a cruel soundtrack to my exit, finally confirming what I'd always suspected. I was the entertainment, not a member of the family. Outside the gate, the evening air was cooler. The sky was deepening into twilight. I got into my used Honda Civic and drove away without a single glance in the rearview mirror. For the first time in my life, I didn't cry. I just felt empty, a hollowed-out shell where my hope for their love used to be. I drove for hours, the headlights of my car cutting twin paths through the dark California night. My hands were numb on the steering wheel. The scene played on a loop behind my eyes. The falling cake, Leo's smug grin, the unified laughter, my mother's dismissive wave. Each replay carved the memory deeper, etching it into me with the cold precision of a laser. By the time I pulled into the parking garage of my Seattle apartment building, it was past midnight. The city was quiet, a light rain misting the windshield, blurring the world into soft, indifferent shapes. I rode the elevator up in silence, the hum of machinery the only sound. Inside my apartment, I dropped my keys on the counter. The clink was abnormally loud in the stillness. I kicked off my frosting-stained shoes and sank onto my sofa, not bothering to turn on the lights. The glow from the city, skyline outside my window painted, the room in shades of blue and gray. I sat there, breathing in the silence, waiting for the tears to come. They didn't. I just felt a vast echoing stillness. Then my phone buzzed on the coffee table. The screen lit up the dim room. A text from Mom. For one heart-stopping, naive second, I thought it might be an apology. Maybe she'd replayed the scene too and felt a shred of guilt. Maybe she was calling to check if I'd gotten home safe. I opened the message. The words were stark and clinical on the bright screen. We've chosen to sever all contact. Stay away forever. I stared at it. My breath caught in my chest. It felt like a physical blow. Then a few seconds later, a small, red heart emoji appeared beside the message. Jessica. She had liked it. She had seen our mother formally disown me, and she had given it her digital stamp of approval. That was it. The final definitive act of exclusion. A strange calm descended over me. The numbness cracked, not into sadness, but into a crystalline, icy clarity. It was over. There was no more guessing, no more hoping, no more trying to earn a love that was never meant for me. I stood up, my movements deliberate, and walked to my desk. I opened my laptop. The blue light flickered across my face in the dark room. I opened my banking app first, then a folder of scanned documents I kept labeled Family Finances. There they were. 2 PDFs that represented 3 years of my financial life. Loan agreement, co-borrower Maya Evans. Property, 142 Oak Lane. Auto loan agreement, co-signer Maya Evans. Vehicle, 2022. Lexus SUV. I'd signed them because Mom had sat right where I was sitting now. Her voice soft and pleading. Your father's commission check is late, honey. We'll lose the house. You're the responsible one. Just help us out. For Jessica, it was, the interest rate is criminal, Maya. If you just co-sign, I can get the payment down. You're my sister. Family helps family. And I, the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who never caused trouble, had signed. I had set up automatic monthly payments from my account. $450 for the mortgage, $580 for the car. I'd told myself it was temporary. A bridge loan for their struggles. I scrolled back through my messages, finding the old threads. Me, 8 months ago. Hey, just checking in on the mortgage payment for this month. My account is looking a little tight. Mom. Oh, sweetie. Things are still so tight with your father's work. Next month for sure. Thanks for being so understanding. Me, 3 months ago. Jessica, the car payment is due tomorrow. Can you confirm you've taken over? Jessica, OMG Maya, so stressful at work. I'll get it, I promise. Stop nagging. Next month never came. The promises were empty air. I had been their silent, unwilling financial backbone, all while being treated as their emotional punching bag. The weight in my chest wasn't grief anymore. It was the heavy, cold anchor of realization. They hadn't just taken my dignity today. They had been taking my money, my security, and my future for years. The tuition threat they'd held over me in the past was a hollow joke. I was already bankrolling their lives. I opened a new text message. The family group chat. It was still named the Evans family, a title that now felt like a lie. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. There was no rage, no hysterics. Just a simple factual statement, a statement of consequence. I typed 5 words. Removing my name from every loan tomorrow. I didn't add a period. I didn't use an emoji. I just hit send. The message chimed softly as it delivered. I placed my phone face down on the desk. The rain outside picked up, tapping a steady, gentle rhythm against the window. I poured myself a glass of water and watched the condensation slide down the side. For the first time all night, the silence in my apartment didn't feel lonely. It felt powerful. It was the sound of a decision being made, a line being drawn. They had wanted me gone. Fine. But they were about to learn that my presence, however invisible, had been the very thing holding their comfortable world together. The morning came wrapped in a soft gray Seattle drizzle. I stood by my window, watching rain streak down the glass, blurring the city into a watercolor painting. I'd barely slept, but a strange energy hummed beneath my skin. The exhaustion had burned away, leaving behind a sharp, focused clarity. I brewed a single cup of coffee, the rich aroma filling my small kitchen. I thought about how things end. Not always with explosions and drama, but with a quiet decision made in the pre-dawn stillness. A single message sent into the digital void. By 7 a.m., my phone began to vibrate, not the occasional buzz of a notification, but a continuous, angry tremble against the wooden desk. I left it face down. I knew what it was, the first ripple of the tsunami I had created. I opened my laptop, the evidence folder staring back at me. I needed to be prepared. I compiled everything. Screenshots of the automatic payments leaving my account for the last 3 years. Scans of the signed loan documents with my name clearly listed as co-borrower. The text message history filled with empty promises and guilt trips. And finally, a screenshot of my mother's disownment text, with Jessica's heart-like clearly visible. This wasn't just about money. This was my testimony. The phone continued to vibrate, skittering across the desk. I finally picked it up. The screen was a waterfall of notifications. Family group chat. Jessica, are you out of your mind? Mom, Maya Lorraine Evans, you call me right now. This is not funny. Dad, sweetheart, let's talk about this. You're being rash. Jessica, you can't do this. My car, my credit. Mom, after everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? I scrolled, my heart a cold, steady drum in my chest. Not one message asked if I was okay. Not one expressed regret for the cake, for the laughter, for the cruel text. Their panic was entirely self-centered. It confirmed everything. Then a private message from my mother came through. You will destroy this family. I looked at the words. I would destroy the family, not the years of favoritism, not the public humiliation, not the financial exploitation. My act of self-preservation was the destruction. A memory surfaced, sharp and clear. I was 16, winning the state graphic design competition. My poster was mounted on a display board, a swirl of color and typography that the judge called visionary. My parents had promised to be there. The seats remained empty. When I got home, trophy in hand, my mother was consoling Jessica, who hadn't made the cheerleading squad. Some of us have real disappointments to deal with. Maya, she'd said, not even looking at my trophy. That girl, the one who had stood there clutching her achievement, hungry for a crumb of recognition, finally faded. The woman I was now had no more crumbs to give. I picked up the phone and typed a single, calm response to the group chat. I didn't address their hysteria. I simply stated a fact, echoing the words I'd whispered to myself in the dark. I just stopped paying for people who laughed when my cake hit the floor. I pressed send. The response was instantaneous and furious. A deluge of capital letters, accusations of selfishness, of being a monster. The missed call counter ticked past 50. I didn't engage. I had said all I needed to say. Their words were just noise now. The decision was no longer a decision. It was a path I was already walking. I got dressed in simple dark clothes, a sweater and jeans. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were tired, but my gaze was steady. I was no longer their daughter, their sister, their aunt. I was a woman about to reclaim her name, her credit, and her life. I drove downtown through the rain-slicked streets. The wipers swished back and forth, a rhythmic sound that matched my resolve. I parked in a garage and walked to the Glass and Steel tower that housed the headquarters of Green First Bank. My appointment was with Mr. Diaz. He met me in a small, quiet consultation room with pale blue walls and a potted fern in the corner. He was a man in his late 50s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a calm, professional demeanor. Miss Evans, he said, shaking my hand. I've reviewed the documents you emailed. I think I understand the situation. I sat across from him, placing my folder on the table. I co-signed 2 loans, I said, my voice even and clear. One for my parents' mortgage, one for my sister's car. I've been making the payments for 36 months. I need my name removed. He nodded slowly, opening the folder. He scanned the bank statements, the loan agreements, the text messages. His expression remained neutral, but I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Not pity, but understanding. You're not the first person to find themselves in this position. Miss Evans, he said gently. The word family can sometimes be used as a tool for financial manipulation. He slid a stack of papers toward me. Based on this documentation, we can begin the process of co-borrower release. You'll need to sign these forms, formally declaring you have no ownership, interest in the properties, and requesting a full liability release. Given the payment history, the case is clear. My hands were perfectly steady as I took the pen. This wasn't an emotional moment anymore. It was a transaction, a correction of a long-standing error. I signed my name again and again, Maya L. Evans, each signature, feeling like a bolt sliding home, locking a door that should never have been opened. When I finished, Mr. Diaz collected the papers. I'll file these immediately. The process can take a few weeks, but the freeze on their accounts and the halt on your liability is effective as of now. He picked up his phone. Margaret, please initiate the co-borrower removal process for Maya Evans on the Evans mortgage and Wilson auto loan, effective immediately. The sound of his instruction, so calm and final, was more powerful than any shouted argument. This was the system, the cold, hard reality of finance, and it was finally on my side. He looked back at me. You're doing the right thing, Miss Evans. Sometimes, protecting your own future is the only way to teach people that your loyalty cannot be bought, or in this case, forced. I stood and shook his hand again. Thank you, Mr. Diaz. Outside, the rain had softened to a mist. The cold air felt clean in my lungs. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, watching people rush by with their coffees, their lives full of their own dramas and joys. I felt no triumph, no glee, just a profound bone-deep sense of relief. The first link in the chain had been broken. The war wasn't over, but I had just won the most important battle. I had taken action, and I had done it without screaming, without begging, without shedding a single tear. They had tried to erase me with laughter and a text message. I was erasing my financial ties with signatures and a bank stamp. It was the only language, I realized, they truly understood. The silence lasted precisely 3 days. It was a heavy, waiting silence, thick with the unspoken certainty that the other shoe was about to drop. I went to work, I ate meals, I tried to sleep, all while feeling like I was holding my breath. My phone, for those 72 hours, was a dormant brick. No texts, no calls. It was the calm before the storm, and I knew it. The storm arrived on the evening of the 4th day. I was in my small kitchen, stirring a pot of pasta, the steam fogging up the window. The first knock was sharp, a single percussive bang that made me jump. Then another. And another. It wasn't a request. It was a demand. My heart hammered against my ribs. I didn't need to check the intercom screen to know who it was. I could feel their presence through the door, a wave of fury and panic. I walked calmly to the living room and looked at the video screen. There they were. My mother, Clara, her face a mask of tight-lipped rage, and Jessica, her eyes wild, her hair slightly disheveled. They looked like strangers. "Daisy, open this door right now!" My mother's voice screeched. Tinny threw the speaker. "We know you're in there!" Jessica slammed her palm against the door. "You ruined everything. The bank froze everything. My car is being repossessed. Do you think this is a game?" I didn't move. I stood in the center of my quiet apartment, the hiss of the boiling pasta the only sound. I watched them on the screen. These 2 women who shared my blood, as they unraveled on my doorstep. It was a surreal out-of-body experience. "After everything we sacrificed for you," my mother continued, her voice cracking. "This is the thanks we get? You're selfish! You're heartless." I felt a familiar pang, an old ghost of guilt trying to rise. I smothered it. I thought of the cake, the laughter, the text. I thought of 3 years of my paychecks. I picked up my phone. My hands were steady. I opened the voice memo app and hit record. Then I opened a different app, the non-emergency line for the Seattle Police Department. "Seattle PD, what's your emergency?" A calm female dispatcher answered. "Hi," I said, my voice low but clear. "I'd like to report a trespassing issue. There are 2 individuals outside my apartment door. They are yelling, pounding on the door, and refusing to leave. I've asked them to go, but they won't." It was a small lie of omission. I hadn't spoken to them, but the intent was true. My silence was my request. "Do you know these individuals?" the dispatcher asked. I watched my sister kick the base of the door. "Yes," I said quietly. "They're my family, but right now they are trespassers." I gave her my address. She said units were being dispatched. On the screen, my mother had turned her plea to the empty hallway. "She's my daughter. She's destroying our lives. We have rights." Jessica was sobbing now. Ugly, ragged breaths. You've ruined me, Maya. My fiancé is leaving me. No one will ever want you after this. You'll die alone." The words were meant to cut, to maim. But they landed on the new, armored version of myself and clattered harmlessly to the floor. I just kept recording. Within minutes, the flashing red and blue lights painted my walls in rhythmic pulses. 2 police officers, a man and a woman, appeared on my intercom screen. They approached my mother and sister with a calm, professional authority that immediately deflated their hysterics. My mother rushed toward them. "Officer, thank God. This is my daughter's apartment. She's stolen from us. She's ruined our credit. We just need to talk to her." The female officer held up a placating hand. "Ma'am, I need you to step back. Is she answering the door?" "No, but—" Then she has made her wishes clear. "This is private property. You need to leave." "But she's my child," my mother cried, her voice breaking with a performative despair that had once worked on me. "I have rights." The male officer shook his head. "You have rights as a parent, but not the right to harass an adult at their private residence. You are currently trespassing." I watched through, the camera as the reality of the situation finally crashed down on them. They weren't in their own domain, where family dramas played by their rules. They were in the real world, where laws and boundaries existed, the world I now lived in. Jessica looked from the officers to my door, her face a mess of tears and smeared mascara. For a fleeting second, our eyes seemed to meet through the digital lens. I saw pure, undiluted hatred. The officer gestured firmly toward the stairwell. "This is your only warning. You need to leave the premises now, or I will have to place you under arrest for trespassing." The fight went out of them. Shoulders slumped. They were escorted away by the spectral glow of the police lights. My mother turned for one last look at my door, her eyes not filled with sadness, but with a bitter, burning promise of a feud that was far from over. "You'll regret this, Maya," she whispered, the microphone just picking it up. "Family doesn't end just because you want it to." The door stayed closed. When their footsteps faded and the police cars drove away, a silence deeper than before descended. I slid down to the floor, my back against the front door, the phone still recording in my limp hand. My whole body trembled, not with fear, but with the aftershock of a colossal release. A line had been drawn, not in sand but in concrete, and the law had just poured the foundation. I saved the voice memo. I titled it, Boundary, October 14th. The next morning, the digital war began. My phone buzzed with a notification from Facebook. It was my mother, Clara Evans. "It's a sad day when the child you raised and loved betrays you in the worst way. Some people have no gratitude, no heart. They take and then destroy your life when you no longer serve them. Pray for our family." The comments poured in from aunts, uncles, old family friends. I always knew there was something off about her. "After all you did for her, Clara. So ungrateful." She was always the jealous one, never happy for Jessica. Then, the one that twisted the knife the deepest. From a woman I barely knew, "I heard she used your credit to buy that fancy apartment in Seattle and then cut you off." The old me would have been devastated. The old me would have spent hours crafting a response, trying to defend myself, to prove my innocence to a jury that had already convicted me. The new me just took a screenshot. I opened my work email. I wrote a short professional message to my manager and a few close colleagues. Subject, a quick note of clarification. "Hi, team. You may see some untrue and damaging rumors about me circulating online. I wanted to reach out and assure you they are completely false. Part of a personal family dispute. I appreciate your professionalism and will not be addressing this further. Thank you for your understanding. Best, Maya." I hit send. I closed the laptop. The truth didn't need to be shouted from the rooftops. It only needed to be lived. A few days later, a formal envelope arrived in my office mail. The letterhead was from Green First Bank. Inside was a single sheet of paper, signed by Mr. Diaz. This letter confirms that Maya L. Evans has been formally and fully released from all liabilities and obligations pertaining to the joint mortgage held by Clara and Robert Evans, and the auto loan held by Jessica Wilson, née Evans. All processes are complete. It was over. I ran my fingers over the embossed bank seal, the crisp paper. This was my diploma. My graduation. It wasn't revenge. It was justice. A quiet, bureaucratic, and utterly final justice. That evening, I noticed my mother's Facebook post was gone. Maybe someone had finally asked for her side of the story with the bank. Maybe the shame had crept in. I didn't know, and I didn't care. The damage they tried to inflict didn't matter anymore. I was no longer living in the world where their approval was the sun I orbited. I had built my own solar system, and in it, I was the center. My phone buzzed one last time. A text from an unsaved number I recognized as Jessica's. Unknown, you'll pay for this. You think you've won? You're dead to me. I looked at the message, then out my window at the Seattle skyline, beginning to sparkle in the twilight. A faint, peaceful smile touched my lips. Winning was never the point. Freedom was. Weeks turned into a month, and the noise finally died. The frantic calls ceased. The angry texts stopped. The digital battlefield of social media fell silent. The silence that had once felt so threatening now settled around me like a soft blanket. It was no longer empty. It was peaceful. I found a rhythm in my new life. I woke up with the gray Seattle dawn, the soft rain a gentle alarm against my windows. I poured my energy into my work at the design firm. There was a new clarity in my creativity, a boldness in my color choices and layouts that my art director, Ben, noticed immediately. Maya, he said one afternoon, standing over my desk where I was working on a new branding campaign. This work, it's different. It's stronger. There's a confidence here that's really compelling. I simply smiled and said, thank you. Ben, I didn't need to explain that the confidence came from no longer having my foundation constantly shaken. At home, my small apartment truly became my sanctuary. I filled it with plants that thrived in the indirect light. I cooked elaborate meals just for myself, experimenting with recipes I'd been too busy or too stressed to try before. My friend Sarah from work would come over on Fridays, and we'd drink wine and watch old movies, her laughter a sound that filled the space with genuine warmth, not the hollow echo of family obligation. One such evening, as we were washing dishes, Sarah looked at me and said, "You seem lighter." "Maya, I can't explain it. You've always been you, but it's like, you're more here now." I handed her a rinsed plate. "I am," I said, and it was the simplest, truest statement I'd made in years. Then one morning, a year almost to the day after the cake incident, my phone lit up with a single message. It was from Jessica. The text wasn't long or dramatic. It didn't contain excuses or justifications. It was just 6 simple words. "Jessica, I'm sorry for everything, truly." I stared at the message, the name on the screen feeling like it belonged to a character from a book I'd read long ago. I felt a flicker of something, not hope, not the urge to reconnect, but a quiet, distant sadness for the sisters we might have been in a different family, under a different set of rules. I picked up the phone, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I could type, "It's okay," but it wasn't. I could ask, "Why now?" but I didn't need the answer. Any reason she gave would be about her. Her guilt, her life falling apart without my financial support, her need for absolution. I set the phone back down without replying. I didn't block the number. I didn't delete the message. I just let it sit there, an artifact from a past life. I realized in that moment that forgiveness wasn't about giving them back a key to my life. It wasn't about reconciliation. True forgiveness was for me. It was the final act of setting down the heavy burden of their cruelty and walking away, leaving it behind on the road. It was closing a heavy, ornate door and feeling no desire to ever open it again. That weekend, I took a long walk along the waterfront. The air was crisp, smelling of salt and fresh coffee. The waters of Puget Sound were a choppy, vibrant blue, and the Olympic Mountains stood proud in the distance. I found a quiet bench and sat, watching the ferries glide back and forth. I thought about the girl I had been, the one who meticulously planned her life around, earning scraps of approval, who believed that being good and responsible would eventually be rewarded with love. That girl was gone. In her place was a woman who understood that some love is conditional, and that the most important love, the one that gives you the strength to walk away from what harms you, has to come from within. A sense of profound peace settled over me, so deep and so real it felt physical. It was the peace of no longer fighting a war. I could never win on a battlefield I never chose. It was the peace of acceptance. My life wasn't a dramatic story of revenge and triumph. It was a quieter story of reclamation. I had reclaimed my finances, my peace, my time, and the narrative of my own life. As the sun began to dip behind the mountains, painting the sky in streaks of orange and purple, I stood up from the bench. I took one last deep breath of the clean, salty air, and I whispered 2 words to the city, to the sea, and to myself. Welcome home. I learned that the most powerful revenge is not a grand gesture of retaliation, but the quiet daily act of choosing yourself. It's building a life so full of peace and purpose that the noise of those who hurt you simply fades into a distant, irrelevant echo. They wanted me to break, but I chose to build. And in the rubble of their cruelty, I found a strength and a self-love that can never be taken away.